Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Eirini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum. Today we're going to look at the Talit, specifically the Yemenite version of the Talit, which I believe personally is the most scripturally accurate to the ancient versions that existed, the first ones that existed in ancient times, in ancient Israel. This is the closest to it, not this specific color, but just the way the Yemenis do it, so, or wear it. So in Yemen, the biblical commandment to attach tassels or tzitzit to the four corners of one's garment is fulfilled by attaching tzitzit to the four-cornered outer garment worn daily. In other communities where daily attire is not four-cornered, they have special ritual garments, the prayer shawl, the talit, and the vest-like talit katan. They have been used for this purpose. So the Jews of Yemen have several types of four-cornered garments to fulfill this tzitzit law. In Sana'a and on the Central Plateau, every day they have an everyday vestment called the black woolen shawl, or that is described as such, worn over the shoulders, served as a talit. So notice it was black, not white, because white was actually a cheaper garment. Black was more expensive. This is talking about black wool, not just black material. This type of shawl was an integral part of the Jewish male's dress in the region, and the indicative off-white ritual tassels hung from its four corners. A more precious version, made of highly refined black wool, was worn in this region, Yemen, on the Sabbath. The garment's Yemeni Arabic name, shamleh, recalls the Hebrew word simla, used in the Bible. Both words carry the idea of a wrapped outer garment that envelops the wearer, as does the talit when worn during prayers. As a four-cornered garment, the shamleh was subject to the commandment to bear tzitzit, and wearing it allowed one to fulfill the commandment with an article of clothing that served daily functions. In addition to being an article of clothing, it served as a blanket when resting, and this kind of does the same thing for me. It is a Yemeni shawl, and it has tzitzit on the borders, notice. Okay, so this would be fulfilling the commandment, in my opinion. Or a bag for bundling and carrying goods. In rural Yemen, all men, Muslims and Jews, slung a striped, brightly colored cotton shoulder cloth around their upper body, called the li-fe or maznaf, edged with a woven band and fringes. So exactly this. On the four corners, Jews added the ritual tassels, the tzitzit, identifying themselves as Jews. In southern Yemen, the talitot, the talit, that's a plural for talit, were woven in four schemes of green, red, and yellow on an off-white background. These were the standard outer garment in this region, either rectangular in shape or poncho-like with a hole or slit in the middle for the head, similar to the talit katan. Silk squares were sewn on to reinforce the four corners when the tassels were fixed. Skilled Jewish wearers made these garments. Among Yemeni Jews, weaving was a widely practiced and highly respected profession, one that was considered to require special skills. In the poncho-like talit, the edges around the head and neck opening were embroidered with stitches typical of the area. At the turn of the 20th century, the Ashkenazi white rectangular talit, and that's what we know now as a talit for the most part, something like this, with its blue or black stripes along the shoulder, fringed hems, and called shal in Yemen, replaced the traditional Yemenite prayer shawl. So this one has the blue and white tassels, but most just have the white. So we're going to go through all these tabs as much as I can, because I was on a talit fever when I woke up this morning, and we're going to go through these, and maybe we'll keep some of these. You can see, okay, no, that's not what I'm looking for. That's an Instagram. And this is a listing. Oh, that's not it. That's not a talit, but that could be like a female version of a talit, possibly. And I don't know if that could be a female talit. Could that be a female talit? Could it? I don't know. I mean, it's got tassels there. Maybe if you want to feminize it, it could be like that. So this is a picture of a Yemenite Jew. And we can see that it looks like, well, to me at least, that they've combined the traditional Yemeni colored shawl with the white talit. So it's either it's combined or they have both color schemes intertwined together. Maybe they have some kind of something like that anyhow. So let me just make sure if I have this image. I do, because I'm going to close it. I'm not going to read every single word of these articles, but we'll just scan through them. So a lot of people are surprised to know that. So just scan through this article. So they did have a large Jewish population in Yemen a long time ago, but they had a process of moving out of the country. I believe that was 1949 to 1950. They pretty much mass immigrated to Israel in Operation Magic Carpet. So they have a unique, pardon, just put that on silent. They have a unique religious tradition that marks them out as separate from Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and other Jewish groups. Okay, I'm not sure what that is, but it is debatable whether they should be described as Mizrahi Jews, as most other Mizrahi groups have, over the last few centuries, undergone a process of total or partial assimilation to Sephardic culture and liturgy. That's the Spaniard Jews. While the Shami subgroup of Yemenite Jews did adopt a Sephardic influenced rite, this was for theological reasons. It did not reflect a demographic or cultural shift. So, yeah, we looked at Talits. We're also looking at Yemenite Jews as well. So this is kind of like a combination video. One local Yemenite Jewish tradition dates the earliest settlement of Jews in the Arabian Peninsula to the time of King Solomon. One explanation is that King Solomon sent Jewish merchant marines to Yemen to prospect for gold and silver with which to adorn the temple in Jerusalem. The French vice consulate in Yemen wrote to the leaders of the alliance in France. He read the book of the Arab historian Abu al-Fada that the Jews of Yemen settled in the area in 1451 BC. So that's one possibility. Another legend places Jewish craftsmen in the region as requested by Bilqis, the queen of Saba. So that's the name of the queen of Saba, Bilqis. Interesting. The Beta Israel or Bashim, Jews in nearby Ethiopia, have a sister legend of their origins that places the Queen of Sheba as married to King Solomon. And I covered that in another video. I believe their love child was named Menelik. Parts of Yemen, Eritrea, and Ethiopia at that time were jointly ruled by Sheba or Saba, with its capital in Yemen. So it seems that Sheba is actually in Yemen and it is called Saba. It still exists today, if I'm not mistaken. The Sanaite Jews have a legend that their ancestors lived in Yemen 42 years before the destruction of the first temple. It is said that under Prophet Jeremiah, 75,000 Jews, including priests and Levites, traveled to Yemen. Wow, okay, that's a large population. The Jews of Haban in southern Yemen have a legend that they are the descendants of Judeans who settled in the area before the destruction of the Second Temple. So these Judeans supposedly belonged to a brigade dispatched by King Herod to help the Roman legions fighting in the region. Another legend says, when Ezra commanded the Jews to return to Jerusalem, they disobeyed. So he pronounced a ban on them, Ezra did. According to this legend, as a punishment for this hasty action, Ezra was denied burial in Israel. As a result of this local tradition, which cannot be validated, it is said that no Jew of Yemen gives the name of Ezra to a child because of this story. Although other biblical appellatives or names are used, the Yemenite Jews claim Ezra cursed them to be a poor people for not heeding his call, not listening to him. This seems to have come true in the eyes of some Yemenites, as Yemen is extremely poor. However, some Yemenite sages in Israel today emphatically reject this story as a myth, if not outright blasphemy. So I know there's a lot of different stereotypes about Jewish people, but one that is not well known is that Yemenite Jews are poor, according to this article. The immigration of the majority of Jews into Yemen appears to have taken place about the beginning of the 2nd century AD. Although the province is mentioned neither by Josephus nor by the main books of the Jewish oral law, the Talmud and the Mishnah. According to some sources, the Jews of Yemen enjoyed prosperity until the 6th century AD. The Himyarite king Abu Karib Asad Toban converted to Judaism at the end of the 5th century. Interesting, because if I remember correctly, the Himyarites waged war with the kingdom of Aksum, which was ancient Ethiopia. While laying siege to Medina, his army had marched north to battle the Aksumites. So there we go, just talking to mention that, who had been fighting for control of Yemen for 100 years. The Aksumites were only expelled from the region when the newly Jewish king, Abu Karib Asad Toban, rallied the Jews together from all over Arabia, together with pagan allies, but this victory was short-lived. In 518, the kingdom was taken over by Zara Yusuf, who was of royal descent, but he was not the son of the predecessor Madib Karib Yafur. He converted to Judaism as well, and instigated wars to drive the Aksumite Ethiopians from Arabia. Zara Yusuf is chiefly known by his cognomen Du Nuwas, in reference to his curly hair. Jewish rule lasted until 525 AD, when Christians from the Aksumite kingdom of Ethiopia defeated and killed Du Nuwas. Interesting, we have wars between the Jewish Himyarites and the Christian Aksumites, or Ethiopians. According to a number of medieval historians who depend on the account of John of Ephesus, Du Nuwas announced that he would persecute the Christians living in his kingdom because Christian states persecuted his fellow Jews in their realms. A letter survives written by Simon, the bishop of Beth Arsham, in 524, which recounts the persecution by a person referred to as Dimnon in Najran, modern Al-Uqdud in Saudi. The persecution is apparently described as and condemned in the Quran. Okay, I'm going to just fast forward a little bit. I'm just going to read with my eyes a little. So we can see there's a lot of change of leadership and rule over the country of Yemen. So what is clear is that the Jewish Yemenite kings did not force Judaism on their subjects, following the Talmudic view that righteous peoples exist in all cultures and religions and they don't need to convert to Judaism to be saved. As a consequence, it is not clear what percentage of the population was or became Jewish. Okay. Sana'a, however, was said to be a chiefly Jewish city. And then we talk about the rise of Islam in Yemen, so I'm going to just skip over that. Okay, Jews of Yemen were treated as pariahs, so scapegoats, I believe, second-class citizens who needed to be perennially reminded of their submission to the Islamic faith. Okay, under the Zaydi rule, the Jews were considered to be impure, and therefore they were forbidden to touch a Muslim or a Muslim's food. They were obligated to humble themselves before a Muslim, to walk to the left side and greet him first. They could not build houses higher than a Muslim's or ride a camel or a horse. Reminds me of Germany, when Jews were not allowed to drive cars and so on. And when riding on a mule or a donkey, they had to sit sideways. Wow. Upon entering the Muslim quarter, a Jew had to take off his footgear and walk barefoot. So just make life really hard for them. If attacked with stones or fists by Islamic youth, a Jew was not allowed to defend himself. In such situations, he had the option of fleeing, running away, or seeking intervention by a merciful Muslim passerby. So life was very harsh for them. The Jews of Yemen had expertise in a wide range of trades normally avoided by Zaydi Muslims. Trades such as silversmithing, blacksmiths, repairing weapons and tools, weaving, pottery, masonry, carpentry, shoemaking, tailoring were occupations that were exclusively taken by Jews. So that explains their poverty, I would assume. The division of labor created a sort of covenant based on mutual economic and social dependency between the Zaydi Muslims and the Jews of Yemen. Okay, so the Muslims produced and supplied them with food. The Jews supplied them with products and services that they needed, the farmers specifically. Yemenite Jews and Maimonides. So they lived in Aden, and 200 population, there's different populations. So there are many significant Jewish communities in Yemen. They were based in the south-central highlands in the cities of Taiz. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of that. During this period, messianic expectations were very intense among the Jews of Yemen and among Arabs as well. They had 3 pseudo-messiahs. I'm not going to name them all, but you can read that. According to the Jewish traveler Jacob Safir, the majority of Yemenite Jews during his visit of 1862 entertained the belief in the messianic proclamations of Shukr Kuhail I. Okay, so they had various messiahs and they were hopeful for a messiah. I would suppose to rescue them from under the burdens of the Muslims in that area. The Yemenite Jews are the only Jewish community, other than the Aramaic-speaking Kurdish Jews that are in Iraq, who maintained the tradition of reading the Torah in the synagogue in both Hebrew and the Aramaic Targum. Wow, I didn't know that. I thought they only spoke Hebrew and Arabic. But non-Yemenite synagogues have a hired or specific person called a Baal Koreh who reads from the Torah scroll when congregants are called to the Torah scroll for an aliyah. In the Yemenite tradition, each person called to the Torah scroll reads for himself. Okay, I'm not going to read all that. Like most other Jewish communities, they chant different melodies. I noticed that as well. They have a different pronunciation, the Yemenites do. And they sing very beautifully. They're very gifted musically as well. Every Yemenite Jew knew how to read from the Torah scroll with the correct pronunciation and tune, exactly right in every detail. Each man who was called up to the Torah to read his section was called up to read by himself. All this was possible because children right from the start learned to read without any vowels. Their diction is much more correct. But listen to this. Their diction is much more correct than the Sephardic and Ashkenazic dialects. The results of their education are outstanding. For example, if someone is speaking with his neighbor and they need to quote a verse from the Tanakh, he speaks it out by heart, without pause or effort, with the melody. Larger Jewish communities such as Sanaa and Sada, boys were sent to the Malamed at the age of 3 to begin their religious learning. They attended from early dawn to sunset Sunday through Thursday and until noon on Friday. Wow. From early, when the sun's rising, up to sunset. So they were in school all day, literally. Jewish women were required to have a thorough knowledge of the laws pertaining to kashrut and taharat mishpacha, family purity, such as the nida. Some women have even mastered the laws of shechita, acting as ritual slaughterers. Wow. So they really maintain a lot of their, not just traditions, but even the Torah in a very devout way. People also sat on the floors of synagogues instead of in chairs, similar to the way many other non-Ashkenazi Jews sit in synagogues, and the way Yemeni Muslims sit in mosques. In fact, to this day, chairs are quite rare in Yemen. This is in accordance with what Rambam wrote in his Mishnah Torah. We are to practice respect in synagogues, and all of the people of Israel in Spain and in the West and in the area of Iraq and in the land of Israel are accustomed to light lanterns in the synagogues and to lay out mats on the ground in order to sit upon them. But in the cities of Edom, portions of Europe, there they sit on chairs. And then it says here, and because of this prostration, all of Israel is accustomed to lay mats in their synagogues on the stone floors or types of straw and hay to separate between their faces and the stones. So they are bowing, similar to how Muslims pray. They are prostrating on the ground. That was the custom of Jews back then. We don't see that being done nowadays. They're just standing up and they're bowing. They're not physically bowing down with their knees on the floor, heads on the ground, which is scriptural. Okay, so the lack of chairs may have also been to provide more space for prostration. They continued to practice that until very recent times. There are still a few Yemenite Jews who prostrate themselves during the part of everyday Jewish prayer. It's called the Tachanun supplication. They usually do so in privacy. Prostration is still done during the Tachanun prayer. Jews of European origin generally prostrate only during certain portions of special prayers during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Prostration was a common practice amongst all Jews until some point during the late Middle Ages or Renaissance period, and that's sad because it's not showing the amount of respect we should to our Creator. We really should bow with our heads to the ground, as Abraham did, as so many great men of faith and women of faith did. Like Yemenite Jewish homes, the synagogues in Yemen had to be lower in height than the lowest mosque. Okay, so I'm going to skip over that. Beauty and artwork were saved for the ritual objects in the synagogue and in the home. During a Yemenite Jewish wedding, the bride is bedecked with jewelry and wears the traditional wedding costume of Yemenite Jews. Her elaborate headdress is decorated with flowers and rue leaves, which are believed to ward off evil. Gold threads are woven into the fabric of her clothing. Songs are sung as a central part of a 7-day wedding celebration. Remind you of something, Sukkot? And their lyrics often tell of friendship and love in alternating verses of Hebrew and Arabic. And also the Feast of Unleavened Bread is also 7 days at least. Passover and unleavened bread. Yemenite and other Eastern Jewish communities also perform a henna ceremony, an ancient ritual with Bronze Age origins, a few weeks or days before the wedding, that is still being done today by many faiths. In the ceremony, the bride and her guests' hands and feet are decorated in intricate designs with a cosmetic paste derived from the henna plant. Okay. After the paste has remained on the skin for up to 2 hours, it is removed, and it leaves a deep orange stain that fades after 2 to 3 weeks. Yemenites, like other Middle Eastern, North African Jewish communities, had a special affinity for henna due to biblical and Talmudic references. Henna in the Bible is called camphire or campfire. It is mentioned in the Song of Solomon. I didn't know that. My mind is blown. My beloved is unto me as a cluster of campfire, and not campfire, in the vineyards of En-Gedi. Let me pause the video. Look that up. Okay, so I can confirm in verse 14 it does say that indeed in the Septuagint. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to scan the article and give you the highlights for the remainder of the video. Okay, we're going to talk about Yemenite Hebrew now. So there are two main pronunciations of Yemenite Hebrew, considered by many scholars to be the most accurate form of biblical Hebrew. Although there are technically a total of 5 that relate to the regions of Yemen. In the Yemenite dialect, all Hebrew letters have a distinct sound, except for the letters O, Samech, and Sin, or Shin. The Sanani Hebrew pronunciation, used by the majority, has been indirectly critiqued by Saadia Gaon, since it contains the Hebrew letters Gimel and Guf, which he rules is incorrect. There are Yemenite scholars such as Rabbi Ratzon Arusi who say that such a perspective is a misunderstanding of Saadia Gaon's words. And then we have a pronunciation chart. Rabbi Mazuz postulates this hypothesis through the Jurban, Tunisia Jewish dialect's use of Gimel and Kuf, switching to Gimel and Guf when talking with Gentiles in the Arabic dialect of Jerba. Some feel that the Sharabi pronunciation of Yemen is more accurate and similar to the Babylonian dialect, since they both use a Gimel and Kuf instead of the Gimel and Guf. While Jewish boys learned Hebrew since the age of 3, it was used primarily as a liturgical and scholarly language. In daily life, Yemenite Jews spoke in regional Judeo-Arabic. Interesting. Writings. We're going to end with writings. Manuscript page from Yemenite Midrash Haggadah and Genesis. The oldest Yemenite manuscripts are those of the Hebrew Bible, which the Yemenite Jews called Taj, or crown. The oldest texts, dating from the 9th century, and each of them has a short Masoretic introduction, while many contain Arabic commentaries. Yemenite Jews were acquainted with the works of Saadia Gaon, Rashi, Kimhi, Namanides, Yehuda Halevi, and Isaac Arama, besides producing a number of exegetes from among themselves. In the 14th century, Nathanael ben Isaiah wrote an Arabic commentary in the Bible. In the second half of the 15th century, Saadia ben David al-Adani was the author of a commentary on Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Abraham ben Solomon wrote on the prophets. Among the Midrash collections from Yemen, mention should be made of the Midrash Haggadol of David bar Amram al-Adani. Between 1413 and 1430, the physician Yahya Zechariah ben Solomon wrote a compilation entitled Midrash HaHefez, which included the Pentateuch, Lamentations, Book of Esther, and other sections of the Hebrew Bible. Between 1484 and 1493, David al-Lawani composed his Midrash al-Wajiz al-Mughni. Among the Yemenite poets who wrote Hebrew and Arabic hymns modeled after the Spanish school, mention may be made of Yahya al-Dari and the members of the al-Shabezi family. A single non-religious work, inspired by Hariri, was written in 1573 by Zechariah ben Saadia, identical with the Yahya al-Dari mentioned above under the title Sefer HaMusar. Okay, not sure what the point of reading the rest is, but let's look at some let's look at some other articles. Okay, no internet for some reason, but this was about smuggling out a 500-year-old Torah. And then we can see how Yemeni Jews have essentially left Yemen. This was 2021. So there are only 6 Jews left in 2021, probably 0 by now. That's an image of the Yemeni Jews, and you can see probably hard to distinguish who they are between them and the Yemeni population that are not Jewish. Okay, so that's all for this video in terms of the Yemeni Jewish aspect. We're going to look at talits in the next video. It's just going to be shopping for talits. I'm not going to buy one on the stream or on the video. I'm just going to show you some very unique looking ones, and there's one right in the background. But that's all for this video. So Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, and peace be unto you. Maranatha. Till next time, look at talits.